Hi, this is Katie with Happy Hearted Watercolors, and today I'm going to show you how to create waves at the ocean. In this painting, we will discuss how to keep the white of the paper so that we can show foam and waves and sunlight shining off of those waves. We're going to show a translucent color. It will look different than this, we hope, because this got too dark and muddy for me. We're going to show how sand looks underneath the ocean water. We're going to show how to keep this white without using masking fluid. We're going to talk about how to make clouds in the sky with a very simple method. So here we go. And the first thing that I think is really important for you to do is I think it's important to practice some of these skills, these discrete skills, before we get started. So in this first part one of our video, we're going to show some techniques that you'll be able to employ to make your painting a little bit easier. If you practice it ahead of time, it's easier. You approach it with more confidence. You can be a little more creative and a little more loose with how you're working. This is yellow ochre, and it's just plain yellow ochre out of my Yarka set. I use Yarka paints for demonstration purposes in my classes. For my own personal paintings, I use Daniel Smith and Marilyn Graham. So what you're going to do to create this sand, water, and foam is to get a little triangle of the sand with the yellow ochre. Then I'm going over here and I've pre-made my colors. It's important to make your colors. This is my yellow ochre for the sand. This is my water for the or my pigment and water for the ocean. And what I'm going to do is go carefully along here, not quite touching the sand with my pigment, and occasionally and intermittently at a very unregulated pattern is go along here to create a touch of the paint and this will create a look of the ocean foam. Then the next question that you might be wondering about how we're going to do this is how do we show that this water is really very, very shallow and the sand is actually showing through. So cleaning off my brush, I'm going to dip back into my sand color and just occasionally tap along here so that I get some of this yellow ochre right up next to the foam. And you don't want to, again, you don't want to be too regulated with it. So maybe I'll make it a little deeper over here. And so this will look to the viewer when it dries, it'll look like the sand is underneath that very shallow water. I'm pulling some of this color out with a dry brush, wiping it and then off on the paper, then touching the sand color again. And now, since you don't want to leave a line there, we'll just come back down and go again. So this is how you're showing sand, water, and foam. Okay, so this is your first technique card. Your next technique card is going to be with the sky, and because the sky is light, but I still want to use this Prussian blue that I've got, I'm going to use the same color, but I'm going to use the wet and wet technique and go both ways. And if my water is so dense that it is sliding off the paper, I'm going to tap it onto my rag so that it isn't too wet. Then the next thing I'll do is take a bigger brush, because when you have a bigger space, you need to use a bigger brush. going in here with a really wet brush and then kind of wiping it off because I don't want this to be too dark. This is Prussian blue, I believe. So I'm just going in here and making a nice smooth wash, maybe. Doesn't have to be smooth because remember we're in the sky, and we're going to put some clouds here because rarely do you go to the ocean and not see clouds. And to make these clouds, one of the ways, there are lots of ways to make clouds, and lots of opinions on this way might be cheating, but I'm going to take a Kleenex and kind of wad it up in one way and just blot, and then wad it up in another way, and blot, and then wad it up in another way, and blot. So there we have a few clouds in our sky. And sometimes I like to put in a little bit of extra, while it's still wet, a little bit of extra hard edges for the edge of the cloud. And also I like to put in a little bit of depth in the cloud so that it looks a little bit like, you know, it's going seceding back into the background. So I've got a little bit of the same Prussian blue kind of bouncing around in there. So this is my sky, very simply, very quickly. Then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my show you how to do the waves. And again, always label what you're doing. If you want to keep this on a ring so that you can have reference on how to do things, I would recommend that you write what it is, and then on the back, write down what you did. Write down the colors, write down what you did first, second, third, kind of like a little lesson plan that you're creating. So to create the horizon and the waves that we did here, right along here, we're going to create a horizon line, and it won't be quite as dark as the rest of it because remember, when you are working in the far away, when you're working far away, I'm grabbing another brush. This brush is all synthetic, and it's a nice one. It works well. It's nice and stiff to be able to grab stuff up. But I want this softer one from Neptune, Princeton Neptune, and I'm just making a nice kind of little bit of a line there and coming along and coming across, maybe even making a little bit of a dry brush there. You can see the sparkles in the water right here where the paint kind of got thin and dry. And now as I keep going, I'm going to go a little darker because as I get closer to shore, the atmosphere is interfering less with what we're seeing. Coming up here, we're going to go into the wave. About here is where our wave is going to be, and so I'm going to create another darker line. And so what I have to do is kind of work along here, and then I want to make a nice smooth line and kind of make it a little darker so that it looks like there's it's deeply behind this wave that's coming up, and then this wave that's coming up, we're going to kind of create it over here. Make sure these look like waves, and here we go down here. Here's another wave, and here we go here. So the next step is I've already made my under the wave color, which is basically a cool yellow and a warm blue, and it made a nice bright, almost lime green color that I'm going to eventually put under here underneath the wave. And to get this going, I want to go back into my Prussian blue and just kind of tuck along here and create this wave looking thing kind of coming off. See, there's my wave, and I'm just going to create a little wiggle in the wave and going on around. Alrighty, so here we go. We're going to add a little darker blue in here because this is tucked underneath, and I want to kind of just bring it down a little bit. And now we're ready to add some of this this color that we've got underneath. And if I have some white spots, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to kind of enjoy that because sometimes the foam kind of goes there. And now I'm going to smoothly bring my Prussian blue, which is over here in my other lid, and again under here. So here we go, and then we're going to take and darken up where this wave is rolling over. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is maybe add a few little deeper parts where the water is cresting over. I want to try to do it irregularly so it doesn't look like there's soldiers in a row. And I feel like that's a little too dark there. So I'm taking a clean brush, rinsing it off, and then pulling up underneath the wave. And I need to let this dry because when it's dry, then I'm going to take the darker color, put it on the side of my brush, and then sweep down in kind of a C shape so that it creates a little bit of this look where there's some darkness in the background. Okay, so here we are with 3 different strategies that you're going to need to get your painting started. And we're just going to go right ahead since we're only at 11 minutes. I try to stop this at 15. That's what I try to do. Never successful, but that's okay. So I'm going to take my big brush. This is just a big, cheap brush from the hardware store in my community. It's called Weimar. And I will just wet that down, not all the way to the horizon line because I want to bring my paint all the way to the horizon line. And I want the line to be nice and smooth and easy. And I'm noticing that don't quite have enough paint. So I'm going to add a little more water. And here we go. And you notice I'm working top to bottom. And so now I am going right to the horizon line, whereas before when I was adding the water, I didn't go right to the horizon line because I wanted to be able to make that horizon line very crisp and very smooth. And we can smooth it out or soften it out later if we want. Tipping my painting on my grater board because that just makes the paint more smoothly flow down without puddles and without some spots being more wet than others. The other thing that's going to keep this smooth is that I'm using stretched watercolor paper on the board, and I'm using Arches watercolor, which is so forgiving. And here I'm taking a dry brush and sliding it along where the water's falling down onto my table and wiping it again, just so that I get rid of a lot of that. And now I'm going to go back to that strategy where I took the Kleenex and decided where I was going to put my clouds. I'm going to have one over the hill and one up higher. And we want 3 or 5. And so I think 3 is going to be a good number. Maybe one up here. And that kind of unbalances our painting. So I'm going to put maybe 2 little ones here. I've got 5. All right, again, now let's go in and let's make some of these edges nice and crisp and sharp, or hard, as a lot of times people like to call them, hard edges. And to keep those from looking too dark there in behind the cloud, I'm going to again clean off my brush, and pull some of that color out so it's not too dark. And let's take this space right here and crisp up that edge a little bit. And now let's take and smooth out this edge right here, make it softer. I just took a dry brush, and look what happens. It took it out completely. Didn't want to take it out completely. I just wanted to soften it. So this area is a little softer. That's a nice soft edge. This area right here is a little softer. Okay, so now I'll see you part 2.